Today, we are going to dive deep into one of the most critical emergencies in all of medicine, the ST elevation myocardial infarction. You've probably heard it called a STEMI. We're going to follow the entire clinical journey, right from that first symptom all the way to survival.
You know, we've all heard that term on TV or in movies, a massive heart attack. But what does that actually mean? What is the specific catastrophic event happening inside the heart's arteries that makes a STEMI such an incredible race against the clock? Well, let's find out.
Okay, first things first. We need to get into the anatomy of this crisis. Because, you see, to really understand how we fix the problem, we first have to understand exactly what broke in the first place. What's the biological chain reaction that kicks this whole emergency off?
So a STEMI isn't some vague diagnosis. It's actually defined by a very specific trio of findings. First, the patient has symptoms that scream, "My heart isn't getting enough oxygen." Second, we see a very particular electrical pattern on an EKG called ST elevation. And third, blood tests later confirm the tragic part, that heart muscle cells have actually started to die.
This slide really shows the domino effect that leads to total disaster. It all starts with something called a vulnerable plaque. I want you to think of it like a tiny, angry pimple filled with fat, just sitting on the wall of an artery. Now, when that fragile cap bursts, the body does what it's supposed to do. It thinks there's a wound, so it rushes to form a scab, a blood clot, to plug the hole. The problem is, inside the tiny pipe of a coronary artery, that clot grows so fast and so big that it completely blocks the entire artery. Just like that, blood flow is cut off.
So, what does this feel like for the person experiencing it? Well, the classic symptom is that heavy, squeezing chest pain, like an elephant is sitting on your chest. And that pain often spreads to the jaw or down the arm. But it's not always just pain. The body's alarm system goes haywire, triggering things like profound shortness of breath, breaking out in a cold sweat, and feeling sick to your stomach. It's a full-body crisis. Okay, so a patient shows up with these symptoms. From that moment, the clock is ticking, loud. And the very first, most critical tool clinicians are going to grab is the electrocardiogram, the ECG. This number right here says it all. 10 minutes. Seriously. From the second paramedics walk in the door or the patient hits the ER, the goal is to get an ECG done and interpreted within just 10 minutes. That's not a suggestion, it's a critical benchmark. Why? Because every single second wasted is heart muscle that's dying.
And this table shows exactly what they're looking for. It's not a gut feeling, it's a diagnosis based on heart data. The key signal is that ST segment elevation. Now just look at how precise this is. The definition of elevated actually changes based on the patient's age, their sex, and which specific camera angle on the heart is showing the problem. For example, check out the V2 and V3 leads. For a man under 40, you need 2.5 millimeters of elevation, but for a woman, it's only 1.5 millimeters. This is incredibly precise medicine.
And boom, this is what it looks like in the real world. You don't have to be a cardiologist to see what's wrong here. Look at the squiggly lines in leads 2, 3, and AVF. See how they're lifted way up off that flat baseline? It's dramatic. Remember, each lead is like a different camera looking at the heart. And right here, these three cameras are all pointing at the same spot and screaming that the bottom wall of the heart is in deep, deep trouble. Now, while that ECG sounds the initial alarm, these other tools help nail down the diagnosis. We run a blood test for something called cardiac troponins. Think of these as proteins that are supposed to be locked up inside heart muscle cells. When those cells die, the troponins leak out into the blood. Seeing them there is definitive proof of heart muscle death. But the ultimate confirmation, the gold standard, is an emergency angiogram. That's where we can actually go in with a catheter, inject dye, and see the blockages with our own eyes on an X-ray. All right, the diagnosis is confirmed. Now, the next phase begins instantly. And this is the race to reperfuse. The goal is simple, but the stakes are incredibly high. Restore blood flow to that starving heart muscle as fast as humanly possible. Time is muscle.
And there are basically two ways to win this race. Option A, the preferred method, is PCI. This is a mechanical fix. We literally snake a catheter up to the heart, open the artery, and pop in a stent to keep it open. But what if you're at a hospital that can't do that and you can't get to one that can within 2 hours? That's where option B comes in, thrombolysis. This is a powerful clot-busting drug given through an IV to dissolve the blockage chemically.
So while the team is scrambling to get ready for that reperfusion, a critical cocktail of medications is given right away. It starts with a 1-2 punch of anti-clotting drugs, First, aspirin, which they have the patient chew for faster absorption, plus another powerful drug called a P2Y12 inhibitor. Together, they stop platelets from making the clot any worse. Next, they add an anticoagulant like heparin to stop the clot from growing. Nitroglycerin helps with chest pain, and finally, oxygen is given. But look at this crucial detail, only if the patient's oxygen level has actually dropped below 90%.
So, once that artery is open and the patient is stabilized, the immediate life-threatening crisis is over. But honestly, the journey is just beginning. Now the entire focus shifts from survival to recovery and, just as importantly, preventing this from ever happening again.
This long-term strategy is built on a new set of medications. Beta blockers are like putting a governor on an engine. They slow the heart down and reduce how hard it has to work. High-intensity statins are absolutely non-negotiable. They hammer cholesterol levels down and help make any other plaques less likely to rupture in the future. Then you have drugs like ACE inhibitors, which help prevent the damaged heart from stretching out and weakening over time, a process called remodeling. They help the heart keep its proper shape and function.
You have to remember, after an insult like a STEMI, the heart is a very fragile organ, so clinicians are on high alert for serious complications. This can be anything from dangerous electrical rhythm problems to the heart muscle becoming too weak to pump, that's heart failure. In the absolute worst-case scenarios, parts of the heart muscle can physically rupture.
And here's a really crucial point. Recovery isn't something that just happens to you. It's an active process. It requires the patient to be fully engaged in cardiac rehab, to be incredibly disciplined about taking their medications every single day, and to make serious, lasting changes to their lifestyle. All right, let's wrap this up and bring it all home. After going through this entire journey, what are the absolute most important things you need to remember?
Okay, here we go. 1. STEMI means a total 100% blockage. 2. Time is muscle, and that 10-minute ECG is king. 3. The name of the game is opening that artery back up, and PCI is the best way to do it. 4. Those first meds are all about stopping the clot. And finally, 5. Long-term survival depends on relentless secondary prevention.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. We've gotten incredibly good at treating a STEMI once it's already happened, but the real holy grail, the next frontier, is preventing it entirely. So what's next? How do we find those dangerous, vulnerable plaques and stabilize them before they ever get a chance to rupture? That right there, that's the challenge for the next generation of medicine.